God of War Ragnarok follows the story of the Greek god of war Kratos and his half-giant son Atreus as they venture through many beautifully crafted Norse realms to stop the plan of the Norse god of war, Odin, and prevent Ragnarok. Elden Ring follows the mysterious and initially meaningless Tarnished on one of the most challenging yet rewarding journeys you will come across. In a world of endless monsters and ruthless demigods to restore the almighty Elden Ring, the backbone of existence, and become the Elden Lord. Both adventures have the prophesised antagonist confront the fate of the world, facing monolithic odds in an unforgettable experience. In this video, I want to put them up against each other on a score-based system to determine who is truly the greatest of this year in all of their following elements: Day 1 impressions, core gameplay and combat, narrative, music, world and level design, graphics, and finally playtime and replayability. There will be no major spoilers for either of these games, so without further delay, let's jump right into this. Day 1 impressions. You may have wondered about the inclusion of Day 1 impressions in my scoring system, so I'll start with that. More and more AAA games are released in an unfinished or unpolished state on either console or PC, depending on the optimization priorities. For example, the highly anticipated game Callisto Protocol that was released recently was review bombed. At this point it has mixed reviews, however on day 1 it was mostly negative on Steam due to its lack of optimization for PC gaming. Even if people didn't see the same problems on the PS5 where it ran the best, it became apparent in the reviews that the core game and narrative had been completely tarnished. It's here we understand the impossibility of ignoring the weight that a day 1 release has on the overall quality of a game. And while neither Elden Ring or God of War Ragnarok were unplayable, one still suffered from optimization for the PC, and that is Elden Ring. The frame drops were extremely consistent and distracting. They occurred in every single boss fight, and this problem was also apparent on PCs that were far more powerful than consoles. Even though From Software eventually fixed this problem, it took a long time to polish it up, and even then the problem still occurs. God of War Ragnarok was released on only 2 consoles, the PS4 and PS5, so they didn't have to worry about different GPUs and drivers they'd need to optimize for. However, the day 1 release was extremely polished from start to finish. Even if Elden Ring had to optimize for many consoles and GPUs and drivers, this doesn't give it any leeway for the state that it was released in, especially for a game that had already been delayed. The AAA gaming industry is one of the most profitable entertainment industries in the world. We've seen many games that get released on all 5 consoles and PC, including the Switch at times, with perfect optimization for each one. So God of War Ragnarok must take an easy win here. Now onto the gameplay and combat. This is a difficult choice to make for anyone who loves both. God of War 4 and all the other Souls-like games such as Sekiro and the Dark Souls series already had amazing gameplay and combat that is still praised today, and both of these games managed to capture and improve upon their predecessors in their own way. God of War Ragnarok took what they learnt from God of War 4, a complete reboot for the franchise, and expanded upon its already near perfect engine. Elden Ring took more inspiration from Dark Souls than Sekiro or Bloodborne, however took inspiration from the sneak mechanics from Sekiro to provide a more tactical experience within the lands between. In God of War 4 you were able to run around, mantle and jump and rock climb around the world, as well as row around on a boat to travel around the shores of Midgard and the other realms. There was no problem with this, however it's been greatly expanded upon. You get to ride a sled pulled by 2 wolves since Midgard is now frozen over due to Ragnarok. However, you still get to row your boats in certain areas, and your Blades of Chaos have become far more useful as you're able to grapple around with ease even mid-combat, making fighting a horde of enemies more versatile and calculated. Elden Ring did strip a grapple mechanic used in From Software's previous title Sekiro, which I felt was a questionable decision as this is From Software's first true open world experience. I felt the environments could have benefited from Sekiro's agile mechanics in some areas, but this doesn't mean the gameplay or combat with enemies felt limiting. There are a whopping 238 boss encounters in Elden Ring, and while some are similar to their previous games, God of War still suffers from the same recyclability with a measly 60-ish bosses. Although the combat itself is incredibly fun and rewarding in both of these installments, Elden Ring gives a lot more freedom and choice to how you approach your battles, with 10 different classes to choose from and 309 weapons for all of these categories, and over 500 different armor sets, where God of War only has a few weapons with a very limited number of playstyles, and only 32 armor sets, 11 of which are for his companion. This can be seen as an unfair comparison since Elden Ring is an RPG and God of War is an action-adventure game, and you could make the argument that wall climbing, mantling, rowing, etc. provide more gameplay versatility. However, this is not where Elden Ring's gameplay shines. From Software returned to their mighty Souls-like experience from Dark Souls and Bloodborne and crafted to perfection. Every enemy or boss has been fine-tuned to near perfection, and few companies make something look near impossible during their first encounter, only to encourage adaptability, pattern recognition, and determination to be the true victor. Death and failure is not only a part of FromSoft's gameplay, but intrinsic to the story. Dark Souls 2's opening scene is a perfect example of this. The first people you meet during the character creation section laugh mockingly at you, saying you don't stand a chance, you'll die repeatedly and eventually give up because they all do. It's important to realize that within Elden Ring's story there are many other Tarnished who lost the grace of the Erd Tree and were banished to the lands between, and you are one of these weak and meaningless Tarnished. Even Melina, the girl who acts as a guide to the player, says herself that she pretended to place her trust in you and simply wanted to test to see if you truly had it in you for what is to come. There is no other company that has combat and gameplay integrated with the whole adventure quite like From Software, and for Elden Ring's range of playstyles and different enemies you'll inevitably encounter, it's hard to argue who is the true victor in this element. Now onto the story and narrative. Don't worry, no spoilers here. Dark Souls and Elden Ring's lore is extremely rich, and each time you play through it, you'll discover something new. The plotline of Elden Ring is amazing, and there are a lot of interesting side quests with multiple ways to approach all of them. But when you're comparing Elden Ring to the whole story of Kratos up until now, and character development between Atreus and Kratos coupled with extremely gripping and compelling motion capture acting, it's difficult to compare when discussing the narrative. After all, the story itself is one of the main reasons why people bought God of War Ragnarok, where gameplay could arguably be the deciding factor for Elden Ring's launch success. A lot of the Elden Ring's lore is shrouded in symbolism, and you need to dig deep to understand it. The only thing harder than beating Melania is understanding Elden Ring's lore. Although the narrative was a lot more guided within Ragnarok, the whole adventure from start to finish was an insanely wild ride, full of twists and turns and touching moments that would make a grown man cry. Christopher Judge yet again did a spectacular job portraying Kratos, and every single actor was unique and believable. Kratos' whole life has been nothing but heartbreak and tragedy, and inevitably lets anger control his every decision he's ever made up until now. God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok is a human look at a demigod who has been given a second chance at life, trying to be a good father to his son and leave his past behind. A past that keeps catching up with him the more he runs away from it. This is a narrative that anyone can play and relate to in one way or another, and every character adds something of value or relatability to the narrative. It's not to say you won't feel any emotional connection to the characters inside Elden Ring, as all have unique motivations and personalities, and if God of War Ragnarok didn't feature Kratos and his backstory coupled with the adventure he's on now, and the themes that Ragnarok displays, this would have been an easy win for Elden Ring. However, for possibly the last God of War game set set within the Norse mythology, they did a spectacular job at wrapping it all up, and the story has extremely impactful emotional moments. The winning pie, without a doubt in anyone's mind, would need to be served to God of War Ragnarok. Now onto the music. It's hard to believe that God of War Ragnarok won the best score of the year while they're up against one of the most ambitious and bountiful soundtracks we have heard this year. Bear McCreary did an amazing job with a lot of the tracks, however, Tsukasa Sato's 70 tracks present within Elden Ring must come out on top in my opinion. And I say my opinion because music of all things is something highly subjective. However, I want to further elaborate why Elden Ring has the best soundtrack of 2022. Previously, From Software's soundtracks have been dark and gloomy, and while Dark Souls 3's main theme is probably one of the best main themes for a video game ever created, it provided fear and tragedy, and this one goes for more determination and ambition, something that Elden Ring's main theme captures perfectly. Not to mention how every single boss fight has a complementary soundtrack that fits so perfectly to the enemy and landscape. God of War Ragnarok's soundtrack was absolutely impressive in its own right and had a unique Norse spin on some of the ones, especially in Svartalfheim, and I understand that this is all subjective. However, having a 70 tracks compared to 27 is something I need to mention. Elden Ring is the easy winner in this category. World/level design. Yet again, this is a difficult aspect of the game to compare, as both have huge and diverse set for areas that the player can travel to. If you don't want to see what the maps look like in either game, I'll urge you to skip ahead to the next category. Elden Ring features 13 different regions, including underground areas or above ground areas. Meanwhile, God of War Ragnarok features all of the 9 realms, and all of the maps are different from one another. There are a lot of similarities between the tones and styles of map design between these two games. However, if there needs to be a clear winner, Elden Ring wins in this category as well. Miyazaki has mentioned The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild to be one of the game's key inspirations for creating this world, and when you take the time to journey through the lands between, it's not hard to see the similarities. Elden Ring does not hold the player's hand and take you where you need to go. You can go wherever you want, whenever you want. Understandably, God of War Ragnarok is a semi-open world game and not a true open world experience. However, the design of God of War Ragnarok's levels is at times painfully cradled. One of the biggest criticisms I can give God of War Ragnarok is how wherever you go and whatever you do, you will have a companion figure out where you need to go for you. Hey, do this. That pillar on the left looks unstable. Hey, throw your axe at this thing. Hey, when you inhale, air enters your lungs and oxygen moves to your blood. This is a bad way to handle level design, because while I was making my way through the story, I truly felt as if I didn't get to each location myself. This may have been deliberate, seeing as Kratos has people helping him along the way for the first time ever. Elden Ring trusted you with finding, or at times making, your own way. You can ask 100 people that played Elden Ring of where they went and what they did in order, and no one would have followed the same set path, tit for tat. The landscapes in both were so incredible. Both games had me put down the controller or mouse in shock and take in everything that I was seeing. However, I still found that Elden Ring's whole world delivered a lot more of a shock factor, especially as the map kept expanding and expanding and new places had something entirely different from the other. I've played Elden Ring for about 150 hours and I still find something entirely new within each playthrough. So now Elden Ring is finally in the lead, but not for long. Graphics. It's no question that both of these games look spectacular, and if this was up to how the world looked itself, obviously Elden Ring would win. But when it's down to the nitty-gritty graphical fidelity of these games, it's an easy win for God of War Ragnarok. Elden Ring still is using the same engine as Dark Souls 3. If you have a GTX 1060, you'll be able to play this game comfortably at around 37 frames per second, even at 1440p. If you want to play a game with good graphics, God of War Ragnarok is one of the best graphical games you could get in 2022. So Elden Ring, sorry, you've tied the leader. Playtime and replayability. Now for the final and probably most important aspect a game could have: general playtime and replayability. Games are expensive. There's nothing worse than paying full price for a game to have a playtime of only a few hours. Investing in something like a console or PC is expensive as is. However, deciding what games to spend your money on is also a decision someone must make. It's safe to say that if you spend your money on either of these games, you will definitely get your money's worth with how long and enjoyable the adventures are. Both have an impressive playtime with many more quests and locations to explore even after finishing the main storylines. God of War Ragnarok does have something when it comes to replayability that Elden Ring doesn't have: difficulty. If you want to spend your first playthrough simply going through the story on story mode, you can do so, and each playthrough you're able to bump up the difficulty for a more challenging experience that does change the combat quite a bit, not only in damage given and damage received, but the pattern behaviors and time to parry in combat. Elden Ring, on the other hand, does not only not have a difficulty setting, but it's the hardest on your first playthrough. When you start New Game Plus, you will absolutely destroy all of the beginning to mid-game bosses with ease. However, like I mentioned previously in the gameplay and combat section, Elden Ring does not have a difficulty for a good reason, and one that From Software should stay true to for the years to come. In terms of replayability, difficulty scaling is God of War Ragnarok's only advantage in this category. God of War Ragnarok is about 24 hours in length if you focus solely on the story, and 51 hours in length if you're a completionist. Meanwhile, Elden Ring is about 40 to 54 hours in length for someone who is experienced with Souls-like games. But if you want to obtain 100% completion, it can take you well over 100 hours. Not to mention, every time you replay God of War Ragnarok, you're still playing as the same guy. Sure, you can change up your style of blocking or runic attacks, maybe favor strength over defense, but with Elden Ring you get to choose between 10 completely different builds, and you can even change up and have hybrid builds. You can have a build that's uniquely your own, or you can go for something like playing as Guts. You can literally have Guts as sword and armor, and you can even get the grafted greatsword from Game of Thrones. In terms of overall playtime and replayability, this is by far the easiest win Elden Ring could have. And with that, the scoring is over and Elden Ring is now the Elden Lord. These are easily the two best games of this year, and it's not hard to see why this whole debate can get so heated. However, whatever game you're more drawn to is the ultimate decider for which you'll find more enjoyable. But thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content and want to see more from the Mold Man, and be sure to let me know which game you prefer and why. Maybe your game of the year doesn't even include either of these, but I appreciate it heaps that you've stuck around until the end of this video, and I'll catch you in the next episode.